A young princess woke up on the top floor of a tall tower, with shackles on her wrists. She could barely remember what had happened the night before, but she was wearing a beautiful wedding dress, and her head was pounding. Flashes of memory revealed a scene from a nighttime battle. She was determined to escape. Hearing footsteps, the girl pretended to be asleep. Two men entered the bedroom, and one of them tried to grope her. The princess headbutted him, then dislocated her finger to free one of her shackles. With the other shackle, she smashed the man's face. Furious, he threw her to the floor. The girl pulled a hairpin from her hair and stabbed him in the eye. Her long dress made it difficult to fight. The second soldier hit her across the face. For that, he was stabbed repeatedly with the hairpin and knocked down with the shackles. She then smashed his knee with a wooden log and threw the poor man out the window. The noise drew in another guard. The princess beat him to death with a hammer and laid his body in her bed. Now, she had to figure out how to get to the first floor. Looking out the window, she saw the invaders forcing her family to their knees. The enemies had locked down the castle to prevent anyone from escaping. Power in the kingdom was about to be usurped by the son of a diplomat, Julius. To legitimize his claim to the throne, the tyrant planned to marry the princess. A warrior woman named Moira was helping him. Julius despised the overly liberal king, who had offered shelter to foreigners instead of conquering them by force. The princess realized this was all her fault. The day before, she was supposed to marry Julius, which would have made him the ruler after the king's death. But at the last moment, she changed her mind and fled. Suddenly, a brute wearing a horned helmet entered the bathroom. While he was doing his business, the girl hid underwater in the bathtub. The man took his time, and the princess nearly drowned. Tearing off the bottom of her dress, she slipped into the hallway. Unfortunately, she didn't get far. The brute grabbed her by the throat. Hitting his huge body was useless and would only hurt her. The enemy wielded a long sword, but he was sluggish. The girl used that to her advantage. When he lost his sword, the man tried to ram her with his horns. The princess leapt onto his shoulders, ripped off his helmet, and drove one of the horns into his neck. That's how she defeated him. As a child, the girl had been trained in kung fu by a migrant woman from China, even though the king had opposed those lessons. A dead soldier was pulled from the river. Julius began to suspect that a People's Avenger had infiltrated the castle, so he ordered a check on the princess. The most athletic of the guards was sent to the top of the tower. Meanwhile, the princess sat down to rest. She tore off the skirt and sleeves that had been hindering her in combat. Two more soldiers entered the room. She stabbed the first one with a broken stick and tied the second to a beam with a cord. When they refused to answer her questions, she shot both with a crossbow. Then, she spotted a group of troops rushing up the stairs. To stay hidden, she had to hang out the window. It seemed the danger had passed, but a chubby man sat down to rest right by the windowsill, forcing her to hang over the abyss much longer than she had planned. Enemy soldiers were looting and drinking in the throne room. The princess quietly slipped past them and made her way into her own bedroom. She needed a special sword. Despite her father's prohibition, she had continued training in martial arts. Her teachers were Lin and her uncle Kai, the king's advisor. It was Kai who had gifted her that sword. The princess swapped her heels for boots and disappeared once more into a hidden servant's passage. The woman with the whip was not just a mercenary. She was also Julius's lover. The usurper planned to slit the old king's throat the moment he took the throne. While the two of them were busy making out, the princess tried to stab them through the wall. However, they were distracted. The guard had finally reached the top floor of the tower and peeked into the bedroom. Everything seemed in order. The princess was asleep under watch. Meanwhile, she had slipped into the next room. There she was startled by a knight in golden armor. At first, it looked like just an empty suit, but the giant was real, and his sword was even larger than the last enemy's. He started swinging it, demolishing everything around him. His armor was too strong to pierce. Eventually, the princess found weak spots under the arms and around the groin. Though wounded, the knight kept attacking. So the princess smashed an oil jar on him and set the giant ablaze. At that moment, the fat guard descended the tower and reported that the princess was still up there. Julius ordered every floor to be searched. They must capture the killer no matter what. One of the commanders insulted Julius's lover. She didn't hesitate to slice his throat open with her whip. An entire army rushed into the tower. From above, aerial acrobats attacked the princess. They managed to wound her, which cost two assassins their lives. She dealt with the first large squad using a string of beads scattered across the floor. The soldiers slipped and fell, and she ran across their shields with ease. The next group wasn't as lucky. She slashed one of them, broke his leg, and hung him upside down from a rope. More attackers kept coming. A stubborn brute with a hammer continued choking the princess. Even after she stabbed him through with a sword, she had to pierce his head to finally stop him. Things got even worse when she was surrounded on all sides. She was saved only because the order was to take her alive. Cornered, she jumped off one of the soldiers and dropped 5 stories down. Only one acrobat dared follow her. At the same time, the half-dead fat guard stumbled by without noticing her. But soon she was surrounded again. She leapt out a window, grabbed a banner, ran along the wall, and burst into another bedroom. The princess was bleeding badly. She needed to hide and tend to her wounds. Her mind drifted back to a conversation with her parents. The king had no sons to inherit the throne, so he was forced to marry his daughter off to Julius. Though the girl had dreamed of one day ruling the kingdom, she remained just the king's daughter. Her father had hoped she'd find the strength to spend her nights with Julius, but the princess had other thoughts. Lin entered the room. The Chinese woman had brought a special ointment for wounds. It would help her student recover quickly. The woman explained that the previous night, Julius had slaughtered the entire royal guard. Only she and a couple of others had survived. They planned to escape through the sewage tunnels, but the entrance could only be accessed from the kitchen. Unfortunately, a group of soldiers was stationed there. They had pinned a cook against the wall. Luckily, the girls were there to stand up for her. They dealt with the scoundrels swiftly. Not even a cabbage could save the invaders. The warrior women wiped them out. But then, Moira entered the kitchen. With a flick of her whip, she dislocated Lin's shoulder and strung the princess up to the ceiling. Somehow, the friends managed to fight back. Lin ordered the princess to flee through the tunnels while she stayed behind to stall Moira. After a nasty dive through waste, the princess sneaked into the dungeon where her family was being held. The guards were 3 drunkards. The princess drank a bit herself before effortlessly taking them out. Her father had never imagined his daughter could so coldly kill people. But the moment passed. Someone knocked the princess out, and she awoke in the throne room. Lin had also been captured. When Julius reached out to touch her face, Lin nearly bit his fingers off. The usurper still planned to marry the princess, but she warned him that if he did, she'd turn his life into a nightmare. Julius didn't like that idea and began considering executing the defiant girl and marrying her younger sister Violet instead. Suddenly, the princess created a distraction. At the same time, Lin grabbed Violet and escaped from the hall while our heroine was thrown out the window. She plummeted into the water from a great height. Sinking like a stone, she was jolted back to consciousness by memories from childhood. The princess cut the rope binding her using a sharp shard on the riverbed and swam to the surface. Julius ordered the wedding ceremony to be prepared immediately. But first, he had to find his new bride, Violet. The princess was searching for her too. On her way, she encountered another knight, but this time, it was Violet who took him out by dropping a full suit of armor on his head. Reunited with Lin, the 3 of them descended into a secret armory. As soldiers tore apart the castle, the warrior women suited up in leather armor. The princess took up her sword, while Lin readied her special bow. Violet wasn't ready to fight yet. Her job was to hide. Julius was about to torture the queen to force her to call for Violet when the sounds of battle echoed from outside. This princess refused to die again and again. Not even an army could stop her, especially not with Lin and her transforming bow, which could turn into swords. Violet couldn't sit still. She found the prisoners and cut the ropes binding Uncle Kai. Then the girls were surrounded by heavy armored knights, but the experienced princess already knew where to strike. Julius finally located Violet and decided to marry her as soon as possible. But the girls showed no mercy, slicing through enemy troops with their swords. The last to fall was an archer. Lin took on the guards inside the castle, with her uncle coming to her aid. Meanwhile, Moira prepared to finish off the princess once and for all, whip in hand, as always. The king tried to take Julius's sword, but Julius stabbed him in the stomach. During the duel, the princess lost her sword but managed to close the distance. She used Moira's own weapon against her and snapped the woman's neck with the whip. At the same time, Lin lost her battle. Julius had wounded the Chinese warrior seriously, and she collapsed to the ground. The smug bearded tyrant placed the crown on his head and challenged his former bride to a final fight. Julius was a powerful and cunning opponent. He secretly stabbed the princess in the leg. She fought back with everything she had, but eventually he knocked the sword from her hands. Forcing her to her knees, Julius thought she was submitting to him. He declared that he would rule through power and fear. As proof, he would now execute the princess. Her severed head would serve as a warning to all. But at the last second, the king distracted Julius. The princess seized the moment and took the usurper's head instead. The king placed the crown back on his own head and declared that he no longer needed any heirs by marriage. It was time, for the first time in history, for a woman to rule, especially one who could take down an entire army on her own. Thanks to the miraculous Chinese ointment, Lin was back on her feet within minutes and personally congratulated her student. And finally, the chubby guard completed his mission. He found the runaway princess. That's where the film ends. Thank you for watching till the end.